Who or what is the inspector? And crucially, does it even matter? Let's find out. Hi there, I'm Giles Goff. I'm an education writer and a recovering English teacher. And today we're going to be looking at the character of the inspector, Inspector Goole. But when I say character, we have to use that term quite loosely. And let me explain why. So let's look at the basics. Inspector Goole is a police inspector who claims to be investigating the death of a young woman who killed herself by drinking bleach and has come to the Birling's home to ask some questions. He shows each family member a picture of the woman one at a time. None of them get to see it at the same time, so we can't say for definite whether he's showing them a picture of the same woman or different women. And he gradually gets them all to reveal their interactions they had with Eva Smith / Daisy Renton. And once he knows everything he needs to know, or he seems to want to know, he leaves telling them that they are not alone. We are all responsible for one body. And if we don't learn that, then we will soon find it out in fire and blood and anguish. Those are the basics. So let's think about the literary context first of all on this one. The Communist Manifesto gets written by Karl Marx and, I'm just learning recently, Friedrich Engels back in the mid-19th century. And check this out for an opening line. A spectre is haunting Europe. The spectre of communism. Now, we know that J.B. Priestley is quite openly inspired by Karl Marx in some areas. So the fact that he uses a spectre, which sounds an awful lot like inspector, I can't help but think that can't be a coincidence. Priestley was a democratic socialist, not a Marxist revolutionary, so he is not calling for you to seize the means of production or to destroy religion or anything like that. But a lot of the, how can I put this? The direction of travel is the same, although they would clearly disagree on the methods of how to get there. What's interesting here, though, is how Priestley is telling the upper class how they need to change and how they need to be more compassionate towards the lower classes. But there's this quote that's been rattling around my head. I've been looking for where it came from, and I think it comes from Aldous Huxley when he says, "Liberties are not given, they are taken." There is none of the rights that you have that have been given to you by those in power. They've been taken by workers, people who are prepared to strike. And I find it interesting that Priestley is trying to talk directly to the upper classes and not the working classes on this one about how to improve the lives of the poor. And it reminded me of another earlier author. Let's look at A Christmas Carol for a second. So Priestley is more interested in appealing to the upper classes than the lower classes. And it's interesting, you can look at A Christmas Carol and Inspector Goule's having similarities because both stories feature a ghostly figure appearing to get the rich to see how their greed affects the poor. Obviously, when I say ghostly, they are explicitly ghosts in A Christmas Carol. Obviously, Inspector Goole is spelled Goole, which is a homophone. That means it sounds the same as ghoul, Ghoul, and a ghoul is another word for a ghost. And Inspector Goole is almost like if a ghost appeared in Christmas Carol and didn't quite convince the rich people that they needed to change. It only works partially, only on Eric and Sheila. There does seem to be a really strong similarity between the two in my head there. It's almost like Priestley is negatively influenced by Christmas Carol. He takes the same literary conceit and kind of flips it on its head. Anyway, I am getting off topic, so let's look at some key quotes from the inspector. It's better to ask for the earth than to take it. That's a key line he uses quite early in Act 1. The implication being that these captains of industry, like Mr. Birling himself, are the ones taking the earth and everything in it. And this is arguably the entire point of the inspector when he says, public men, Mr. Birling, have responsibilities as well as privileges. There's this idea that it's not just what you can get out of society, it's also about what you need to put into society that's important. And then this is the key one that I've mentioned earlier. We don't live alone. We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other. And I tell you that time will soon come when, if men will not learn that lesson, then they will be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. Okay, I put that explosion in there myself because in my version of the play, I put in an explosion sound effect and it was awesome. But that's clearly the climax of the play. That's clearly the bit that really is the most dramatic point. Now, if you are noticing that I'm not talking that much about the inspector himself, there's a reason for that. We know that he's a man. We know that he's a police inspector. And I believe we're told he's somewhere in his early 50s, but we're not given anything else beyond that. There's a mention about him having an air of solidness, for want of a better phrase, but that's all there is. And there's a reason why I think this is interesting, because my central conceit, if you like, is that who or what the inspector is doesn't matter. Is he a ghost? Is he an angel? Is he the voice of God? Who knows? Who cares? It's not important. And I wanted to draw your attention to this guy. This is Bertolt Brecht, and he was born in 1898, dies in 1956, and he was a really important dramatist and came up with a dramatic theory called alienation theory. And the theory involves the techniques that distance the audience from the play's emotional involvement, with the goal of making the audience more active participants in the production. So there is a lot more to this, but in short, Brecht wanted to treat theatre less as just a way to tell stories and more of a way to bring about social change. He saw it as like a megaphone to talk to the masses. It's not surprising that this guy is doing some of his best work when the Nazis are coming to power in his homeland of Germany, and obviously he gets kicked out of Germany, has to escape before the Nazis fully take power. And you can see this idea of theatre as a tool for social change. It's something that comes up again and again and again, and I think that's what's happening here, because what Priestley does is he lampshades the mystery of the inspector. Now, that's an odd term, lampshades, and it kind of comes from like modern day screenwriting. And if you lampshade something, you're drawing attention to something. So if something feels awkward and a character goes, "Oh, well, this is awkward," then you are lampshading it. If you have a character like the inspector and say, was he really a police inspector? And then you don't really give us any answers, then you are lampshading it. Okay? So the key term I want you to focus on, and this will be really useful in your essays, is if you think of the inspector less of a character and more of a dramatic device. He is an authorial mouthpiece. What does that mean? Well, obviously, an authorial mouthpiece is a character that speaks the opinions and the beliefs of the author. Another word for an authorial mouthpiece is a raisonneur. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. A raisonneur is another word for an authorial mouthpiece. I'm not going to lie, if you use that in your exam, that will definitely get your examiner's attention. So see if you can sneak it in there somewhere. So Priestley is desperate to get this message across, so he makes the inspector deliberately vague. Again, similar to how we talked about the fact that he creates the town of Brumley rather than using a specific place. If, let's say, for example, he had used somebody and made it clear that the person has a thick Yorkshire accent or a thick Welsh accent or something, people would then focus on things about that character that might make them anti-establishment from that particular region. So, for example, Yorkshire or South Wales, strong mining communities, that sort of thing. So that would become the focus instead of the message. And when we hear his final monologue, it doesn't matter if the character's an inspector, a ghost, an angel, or even God himself. The important point is that we listen to what is being said. So he wants us to focus on the message that we are responsible for each other. They have just come out of the Second World War, where there's been an absolute dearth of this, where people have been treating others as they are completely different than others, like they are less than human. So this is a message that he's trying to hammer over and over again. So there we go. That's our video on the Inspector. Probably a little bit different than what you were expecting, but I hope you like it. Is there anything we missed out? Did we get anything wrong? Let's talk about it in the comments. I hope that's proved useful and that's given you something for your essays. Please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.